Welcome to the Web3 Unpacked podcast with myself, Rich Pasqua, and Matt Sky, your hosts. Today, we're thrilled to have Brendan Cooper and Cody Marx Bailey of the Andromeda Protocol joining us today. For those who don't know, Andromeda Protocol is the first on-chain OS and platform that allows users to use codeless drag-and-drop experiences to create unique smart contracts utilizing the power of multiple protocols across the cosmos and beyond. The ARC team has been privileged to work closely with the Andromeda team for the past 8 months, and it has been quite a ride, right, guys? We've helped them with the strategy and execution of verbal and visual identity, digital communications, and influencing their UI design experience as well. It's been crazy, guys, but it's been super enjoyable. We're going to get into a little bit of that. We're happy to have you here, and I'm sure we'll have many, many more discussions beyond this one. So welcome, and let's get into it.
Yeah, thanks, Rich, for taking us off. I think, for anybody who's not familiar, if I can ask both of you, Brendan and Cody, tell us a little bit about your history, where you're from, and a little bit about the project, about Andromeda, just for people who are totally new.
Sure. My name's Cody Marx Bailey. I was born and raised in Texas, deep South Texas, and found computers at a really early age, around 10 years old. They came pretty naturally to me. I was just kind of one of those, wonder kids that picked up computing really quickly. Started programming and kind of crawling around the very beginnings of the internet in 1992, 93. And then got into Unix and Linux and sort of the old school operating systems back then. And kind of was raised, I guess, on the early days of the internet using IRC and other protocols like that. In the 2000s, got into the Web 2.0 stuff, building out the social media networks and things like that. Had some pretty big innovation pieces back then. Worked on hashtags on Twitter back in 2006. I started the second co-working space around that same time. So really was into that kind of free culture, that sort of connectivity, the world being connected at a hyper fast pace. And then 2011, 2012, got into the blockchain space, got into Bitcoin, and then saw the Ethereum stuff coming up. And it's funny, people ask me how long I've been involved in blockchain, and I tell them probably about 30 years, and they're like, but blockchain's only been around for 12 years. How what do you mean 30 years? What does that even mean? So, well, the technologies that we're using to build blockchains were all being put together back to the 90s and, even as far back as the 70s and 80s. So all these things coming together really made sense for me, and got into Ethereum, like I said, in 2013, 14. And then had a really big win back in 2017 when I was one of the co-creators of the ERC 721 or NFT standard. And then I thought when we created that standard, we were going to have some really great opportunities to create really awesome financial products. And instead we got, rainbow unicorns and digital Nikes. And it wasn't really what I was excited about. And
we have you to thank for that.
Yeah, that's not what was intended. It's great and all. It's cool, but it's not where I was focused. And so for the last 4 years, last 5 years, I guess, up until Andromeda, I was kind of waiting for the technology to mature enough that we could start creating, really exciting and fun things like insurance and bonds and all these kind of things. And it wasn't until we kind of, Brendan and I and the rest of the team got together and was like, okay, now it's time. The technology is at a kind of the earliest point where we can start doing what we're doing right now. So that's kind of what brought me into it. I've enjoyed working with Brendan for the last 18 months. He and I get along really well, and I'll let him go next, I guess.
Sure. Thanks, Cody. And thank you, Rich and Matt, for having us today. This is really,
of course. Thank you for joining.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm Brendan Cooper, and I'm a 30-year technologist. I've been leading technology organizations during that time from billion-dollar companies and digital transformation to venture and angel-funded startups. That included transaction processing. I came out of and started in the credit card processing business. And this had me working on systems that handled about 20% of the North American transactions at a really, really young age. And I really got an appetite for high tech and how fast-moving technological frontier. So I've always enjoyed being out there. Most recently, I worked for the largest collectible company in the world, Panini. And for Panini, we created the very first officially licensed NFT collectibles for the NBA, the NFL, and the FIFA World Cup, English Premier League, and lots of other globally recognized names. When Cody called and told me what was possible, we've known each other for a number of years. We were trying to solve some problems for Panini, and I was really excited to find out that the co-creator of the 721 standard actually was in my backyard. So we had him in. We tried to do some things, but the Ethereum Solidity, the smart contract language, wasn't up to what we wanted to do. So when Cody called and said, "Look what's possible over here," I left in a hurry and joined the revolution at the Web3 frontier.
Incredible.
You know, guys, after working with y'all for quite a bit now, one of the interesting parts is, and you both have really interesting backgrounds, obviously, but collectively, the core Andromeda team really is quite special. And maybe we could dig into that, because it really, there's a maturity and a strategy from a core team standpoint that really sets you off from other protocols, other software companies in general. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was Cody. Cody made those choices. He's a super networker, and he reached out to the people that he thought were going to help him realize the vision. And it's been amazing, really, because we've got Matt Hawkins, former U.S. Marine Colonel, Top Gun instructor, really extraordinary executive who brings extraordinary global campaign and project strategy, think tank level strategy, and Marine level execution to this project. And Cody reached out to Connor Barr, who's in Northern Ireland. Matt is here with me in Texas. Connor is a really gifted Rust developer, and he has been able to translate and create what we think is a world-changing protocol. It's going to really change the game. So yeah, we've got this continuum of capabilities from extremely technical to very high-level conceptual, but everyone's technologically savvy. Everyone is very deeply immersed in this technology and has been for many, many years, actually.
Yeah, the team structure was one of the things that really kind of, did it for me. And I believe you kind of frame it as, every team member is agile, creative, and adaptable, right? We love that. And in fact, we're going to get into it probably a little bit down the road as far as like workforces and habits and all that good stuff. But that to me is the framework of a modern, a modern technology company. So
yeah. We drew from there was a book written in the late 90s called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. It's a very, very well-known and respected book that was written, and it talks about the creative process for software and how software can be created. And the cathedral is how organizations like Microsoft or Sun Microsystems or Adobe, or SAP create theirs. They have a management structure. They've got all these people down there that it's a pyramid. It's you've got roles and responsibilities. Everything's fairly rigid, and that system works really well for creating enterprise level software. It's one method of creating things. And then you have sort of the bazaar. And the bazaar, if you think about how a bazaar is created, it's by a bunch of people coming together and sharing a common vision to put those things together. And the value comes from the aggregate. And there's really no one in charge. Everyone's in charge. They kind of make decisions based on collective intelligence and input. And right now, our organization is very heavy in the bazaar side, because the types of people, like if you look at all the innovation going on in blockchain right now, it's not coming from Microsoft. It's not coming from the cathedral-like places. Just like if you go back into the open source movement back in the 90s, it was all from people doing it from their bedrooms, from their after hours, after their normal day jobs. And so you have to sort of create that culture and let people bring in these minds that don't want to be told what to do. They have very, very high demand resistance. And so you need that sort of push and pull and allow people to be creative and expressive, because there is no right answer. Once you get into a cathedral, you've got design patterns, you've got a really regimented, hey, this is how you do it. We're going to use these technologies. We've got to put A, B, C, D, E, F, G in order to get the product done. Great. Do that through a cathedral. But when you are innovating something, you can't say, hey, 9 to 5, sit in the chair and innovate, damn it. We need you to innovate, do it. That's not how innovation works. You got to let it happen. It's like, stone soup. It's sort of emergent, and it just sort of happens.
Mm. Yeah. You kind of need people to come to you and be active and really, take a step forward.
There's a ton of natural filtering that goes on. Like some people come into organizations like this and they're like, yeah, but where's HR? It's like, there is no HR. Like, what are you talking about? Like, well, what about, don't we, where's they need all, if someone needs all that structure, it's like, you're probably not the right person, maybe down the road, but for now, you need to be a lot more loose and a lot more willing to kind of bend and flex and work. And so, with that, leadership comes from all points. Some people have more respect or more a louder voice in the organization because they come from a background, they're really talented in one area. And like I tell the guys all the time on the team, we've got about there's about 20 people in our orbit. I tell them, if I screw up or if I say something wrong, dude, just because I'm the boss, if you want to call me that, like, your opinions are just as good as mine. We need to discuss this stuff. Let merit come from all points. Don't, this isn't a cathedral.
Are there unexpected directions that happen? I was just going to ask about unexpected directions when you have that almost more hive mind approach.
Yeah, it took us about a solid year to get the culture down and get the cadence down and get everybody synced in. And we totally got it. Brendan and I, we saw it whenever it happened. It was like, it's finally, like, we finally arrived at this point where everybody is synced in together, and it's like one of the phrases we use inside the organization is the group is run kind of like a basketball team, right? And when a basketball team is really clicking, it's like you pass the ball before the person was even there. Well, how did you know he was going to be there? It's like, I can't tell you why. It wasn't in the plans. It was just, I know that whenever he cuts left, I scoot to the right. That's going to open up a lane here, and you just sort of, it becomes this innate culture that develops inside about who's got what. And like, I didn't have to say this thing because I knew you already were thinking that same way, because we're in sync all the time, and that happens a lot in the organization. It's something you have to be patient for. You can't force that in month 2 or month 3. You have to let it evolve, and then once it does, man, it's powerful. And then you start adding people in. New people into the group, and they pick up that culture because it's so powerful and so strong.
Yeah, it is. And from and that structure, or that really loose, bazaar-like structure, has enabled our extremely talented engineers to lead us to something that's really, really unique in the world. So many people in this space are building really fast. They're looking for the quick flip. They're using existing models. Everything kind of looks like a copy and paste. And we've created something really novel, really powerful. Of course, we're transitioning from the bazaar model to a bazaar and a cathedral. So we look at them as two halves of an organization. And the cathedral, now that we've got the architecture in place and the software is getting really close to launch, we're in a place where we need that cathedral, we need the process, we need the controls and the organization that's going to scale.
Yeah, it's a fascinating kind of dynamic, and it's a real privilege to kind of see it in the works with you guys, to actually see it behind the scenes. And I try and explain to people the experience that I've been having with you guys and the rest of the ARC team, and they're like, "What? They do what?" And it's a little fantastical for people to understand that these micro societies can actually exist, and it's fun, and it opens up debate. And don't even get me started on, or you guys started on the idea of a DAO, because we're going to save that for another podcast. But Matt, maybe I think this is a good time. We really should have these guys give us what is Andromeda Protocol. Give us the overview. The audience we're speaking to today are sometimes techie and sometimes noobs, or normies, sure, as we like to call them in the Andromeda world. Go for it.
I'll let Brendan start, because he gives a better high level view about what it achieves and what we can do, and then I can definitely riff on the technology side. So
sure. So from a business standpoint, we're creating something that looks like a modern operating system. We have a store that has apps that can be used. We've got file systems. We've got the capability to let people build extraordinary applications that access the very best projects and capabilities, both in decentralized finance and throughout the Cosmos ecosystem, and even beyond. Technically, we are a multi-chain and cross-chain operating system, and we span the Cosmos ecosystem. And the unique architecture that we use, which is fully decentralized and trustless, lets us lets anyone push applications and develop them using a no-code builder or a really sophisticated command line interface. But in any case, we're moving towards a place where normal people can sit down and they can build applications.
And from a technical aspect, early on, I guess this was probably about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, the idea of calling ourselves an operating system was there, but Brendan and I didn't really feel like that was the best descriptor of what we were building. And it's been about, I guess maybe 2 months ago, we finally, once we were getting closer and closer to launching and the software took shape, we started going, I hate to say it, but I think this is an operating system. And that's a big claim. It sounds, to the untrained eye, it's that can look like a phrase that is marketing speak, or it's like, well, what does that actually mean? An operating, like on a blockchain? How does that even? How do you reconcile that technically, or even like how can you say that? Well, if you go back to the late 1950s, early 1960s, you look at these computers that were built, right? And remember the old days, the size of a room, and it was a large calculator, and it can do 10,000 transactions per hour or something like that, and you had vacuum tubes and all this kind of stuff. Okay, great.
Punch cards, yeah.
Yeah, you go back to all that kind of stuff. All right, cool. Well, if you look at that architecture and you look at the capability of those machines, and then you fast forward 60, 70 years and you look at what's going on in blockchain, it's like, dude, those are the same thing. Like, those computers are like, these blockchains, they're really cool. They're secure. They do all these, cryptographically sophisticated things with, massive amounts of processing power. But all that stuff that's being done results in a very, very small amount of computation being done in a very, very fragile and very, very nascent technology stack that's barely able to perform little bitty things. I mean, like, you look at what Visa and MasterCard are doing, and you compare that to, I don't care what blockchain you're talking to, like, it just doesn't compare. And so if you look at these blockchains as computers, which is really what they are, if you want to look at the definition of a computer, and I'm talking like going back to the 1960s and 70s and looking at the definitions of these terms, not operating system in 2022, where you talk about Mac OS, Monterey and Windows 11 and iOS, whatever. Like, those are operating systems that have been way advanced. But if you go back to the late 60s and the early 70s, and you look at operating systems, and what did they do? What did an operating system do? What did it give us? Well, it gave us the idea of, like, the ability to start running multiple applications at the same time to connect those applications, right? So no longer were using punch cards, right? Turning the machine off, loading up new punch cards, turning it on, and it does its thing and then it ends. It's actually running and it's doing multiple things at one time, and systems can feed each other. And there's a protocol in the back end. There's these input and outputs. And this is what the guys that started Unix, back in at Bell Labs back in the late 60s, that's what they did. They created this with the C language, they were able to start connecting these things. There's some pretty cool parallels that I think need to be mentioned. But for our protocols, we're using Rust, which is really a derivative of C++, which is a derivative of C. So we're already in that same space. We're using a proper language to develop something that looks like an operating system, something that has a user space. It's got users, not just keys, not just a public and a private key that you stash in a wallet and a Chrome plugin. We're talking about an actual system that's running. It actually has a scheduler. It's got automation. Things are working on its own. It's not everything's having to be poked by a wallet day to day. That's the kind of stuff we need to see happen. And right now, we're not seeing anybody in the blockchain space recognize this piece. And I think that comes from like we were talking earlier. You asked about putting the right team together. I wouldn't expect a 19 or a 20-year-old to understand these things because they're this close to the technology. They've always been this close to technology. They don't have in my case, 30 years of experience playing with operating systems and understanding them at a very, very low level. And it would be really difficult to try to tell a 19 or 20-year-old, some blockchain degen to go out and hey, go study, the computers of the 60s. They're going to say, what are you talking about, old man? Why would I look at a computer from the 60s? This is 2022, baby. I've got blockchain on my phone. You're missing the point. There's architectural decisions. There's a lot we can glean from history on this stuff to know what the next path forward is going to be. We think we have that.
Cody, you've brought up the idea of understanding history, and we truly believe the same thing in the sense that in order to go forward into the future, into new technologies, you really have to, you don't have to be a complete historian, but you do need to understand the progression of technology, the progression of thought process in order to kind of push forward a little bit harder and more accurately. Now, one other thing, too, you guys brought up, and I think this is really, really important, given what we've seen over the past 4 months, pancaking protocols, implosions, the importance, if you could talk briefly about the importance of multi-chain and why that's important and how that sets Andromeda up differently over other protocols.
Sure. So today the decentralized finance and Web3 is really fairly controlled and represented by a few really large blockchains like Bitcoin, which is a generation 1 chain, like Ethereum, which is really a second generation chain. And these are really, really good technologies, but they were the very earliest imaginings of what the technology can be. And what happens is when you have a single global machine, you end up constrained from a design principle. You end up in a situation where it's really difficult to ship code and to actually iterate and improve software. And software needs to be iterated. It needs to be, it needs to morph and change and be developed over time. And so the multi-chain future, as we see it, really unlocks both the speed of development and innovation, but it also lets builders execute very specific business models that require very specific kinds of computation. And there are a number of different cases for this, but a really simple example is, say, a privacy chain that is using cryptography to make and ensure privacy on the blockchain. A chain like that is going to be computationally quite a bit more expensive to operate than a chain that is not securing and providing that kind of privacy using cryptography. And it's going to have a higher cost. And you may want those features, but you don't want to be locked into that cost structure. The multi-chain future also mitigates what you described, which is when you have a failure, okay, you're not, you've got a dispersed set of blockchains around the world. They have different security guarantees. They have different applications. They become very specifically engineered to support certain kinds of applications. And what this does is it creates a much better environment. It creates more opportunities to innovate, and it also creates, it insulates from the risk that any one chain is going to fail.
Yeah, and we've seen that. So you guys have taken the right precautions from day one and really kind of stretched your minds and your development skills to really meet that demand and actually have the foresight to stay, again, like a basketball team, Cody.
Yeah,
you know,
and that's a very key component to the platform that we decided to build on. That was the Cosmos ecosystem. One of the biggest components of this Cosmos ecosystem is the ability to interact with other chains in a very, very simple and fast way through a protocol called IBC, which is quickly becoming the standard for communications across different blockchains. It's a very, very key component to what we're building.
I'm curious, just a really quick rewind. It struck me when you said you were reluctant to call Andromeda an operating system. I know sometimes previously I'd heard in some interviews sort of like the WordPress of blockchain and things like that. When did you determine it was time to say, no, this is significant enough that we need to use that terminology, that this is an operating system?
That's a really good question, and one that kind of makes me squirm, because in some ways we're creating or in a lot of ways we can compare ourselves to a WordPress, because we do have a web interface that allows for you to basically use code that's written by somebody else, of course audited and tested, but for you to assemble those things like you do on in a WordPress interface. So that is not incorrect. And saying, needing that kind of functionality, I think a lot of people in the blockchain space would say, yeah, we should probably get to a point where the average user can walk up and just start creating applications or solutions on these chains. The word operating system, it's really difficult. Like that's the word that Brendan and I had the biggest pushback on early on, was because when you say operating system, people think, oh, like Windows. It's like, no, there's no mouse, there's no screen. These are computers that don't have sophisticated outputs. They're literally transactions on a ledger that we can't see. It's like, but that's what operating systems looked like back in the 1960s. That's what an operating system looked like, was everything was being dumped down to a 1 megabyte hard drive, and you could basically print stuff out to get data feeds out of this thing on paper. Well, we have something very similar to that now. So how we use those words, analogies help bridge the gap on education, and we have to sometimes shoehorn some modern technology terms into what we're doing.
Yeah, Cody, cool. I would elaborate.
I think.
Because what Cody was describing is correct. However, we do have an application interface that has icons of distributed decentralized applications, dApps. There's a library of them. It's very small right now. It's growing. And so that means we can offer mobile experiences. It means that we can have web experiences that look and feel just like your operating system. We've got hierarchies and file systems of these dApps and utilities and other services that are very similar to what are used by operating systems today. And so when you combine all that together, along with a powerful, expressive, succinct command line interface, you get something that looks exactly what application developers and what consumers think of as an operating system. A computer science
For me, understanding your world quite a bit, I was so impressed with the idea of Andromeda digital objects, or ADOs, right? And to me, that's the heart of it. And to have smart contracts that have been thought through and vetted and pressure tested and right at your fingertips, that is hyper powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So that was Cody's, that was his that was his insight. That was, that he's always wanted to build what he called functional NFTs. And what emerged is Cody created a breakthrough in modular smart contract programming. And what we've created are, as you described, these Andromeda digital objects, which are bundles of code that the design principle behind them is that they're very simple. They accept very simple inputs, produce outputs, and they can be combined into really complex systems that turn into really capable apps.
Yeah, quite powerful.
So what's the relationship then in terms of where it lives, where Andromeda lives, and what's the relationship to Cosmos and Solana? Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Cody, you want to take that?
Sorry, I didn't specify who. I assume you're a hive mind. You said you were a hive mind. I assumed you'd both answer.
Yeah.
So Cody, starting with.
Yeah. So the Andromeda, we deploy the Andromeda logic library, which is a set of smart contracts. Right now, we're at about 28 to 30 smart contracts. We'll be up to probably 200 in a year from now. And what that is the actual logic and all of the intentionality is put on chain. Right now, there's a lot of applications out there that do things off chain. They do things on an AWS cluster. They do things, in an interface, a web interface with maybe a MySQL backend or some sort of off chain place. And that was mainly done because it was damn expensive to do things on Ethereum. You were trying to offload as much functionality off chain in order to lighten the load. We're not asking the blockchain to do so much. Well, one of the big breakthroughs on this was the fact that I got tired of waiting for Solidity to actually mature and become an actual functional language. And that's when, looking at Rust, it was like, holy crap, this is a big language. This is a very, very, it's a language that's being used in the Linux kernel. You would never use Solidity anywhere but smart contracts on Ethereum or anything in the EVM. And so when you finally kind of tear into this new opportunity that Rust affords, now you can start doing much more sophisticated things on chain. This could not be done on Solidity. Let me say this. It could be done on Solidity. It would take you 5 years to build it, and it wouldn't. It's not the right place to do it. And so this environment on the Cosmos ecosystem with Rust and the CosmWasm stack, interchain accounts, and IBC, this whole stack, it's like, oh, we finally have a computer that's capable of running something that might look like an operating system. You go to Ethereum, it's like, it's not built for that. It's not built to create something like that. So what Brendan said earlier about first gen and second gen blockchains, this is a third gen blockchain. And we're finally, these blockchains are finally getting to a point that they're mature enough that you can build really sophisticated applications. One thing that we're seeing inside the Cosmos is you've got a lot of people coming in from Ethereum, right? Leaving the Ethereum ecosystem because they're, for the same reasons, they're tired of it. It's gas fees are too high. It's too crowded. There's, it's an older architecture, and they move into the new one. And what do? A lot of guys are building the same systems they built on Ethereum. They don't realize that, like, hey man, you can do a lot more here. Why don't we get, more sophisticated with more stuff? And that's kind of where we've taken the lead.
I can't leave this one unanswered. Brendan, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just said you said blockchain 1, blockchain 2, blockchain 3. We have Web3. Everywhere, all the numbers. What's the distinction? Yeah. What is blockchain 3 versus 1 and 2? Give us that sense. Starting with Cody, and then going to Brendan.
So really, on a technical sense, what Bitcoin gave us was the ability to do Bitcoin, a very simple proof of work system that allowed us to basically send coins from one person to another and have a debits and credits system on a blockchain. I realize there's going to be some Bitcoin maxis that'll tell me about opcodes and want to get into that.
Yeah.
But it was a first gen blockchain. It's done very well. It's the king of coin. It's always been stable and true. And then Ethereum came out and said, well, what if we put logic on the chain? And so, Vitalik and Gavin and these guys got together and said, we're going to create this Ethereum operating system. And wow, we can start creating applications on here. So no longer is it just the debits and credits, but it's if this, then that. We can do some really sophisticated things.
So that was a big quantum leap, obviously.
Way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's what really got me. I mean, I'm a amateur economist, and the Austrian school is where I've spent most of my time. And so, of course, Bitcoin was always there, but I'm an engineer and I want to create things. And with Bitcoin, I really couldn't create much more than payment channels, I guess. So Ethereum came through, and it was the first attempt at creating smart contracts on a blockchain, and that worked really well. I mean, we've been using it for almost 10 years now. It's done a lot, but the architecture, that group that built Ethereum didn't know where the problems were down the road. And so if somebody said, after 7 years, 8 years of $80 gas fees, there's groups that are out there that are saying, what if we were to re-architect what they did and do it a little bit differently and improve upon that? So a next generation blockchain. That's what the Tendermint and Cosmos ecosystem sort of built together. And now we have this sort of federated Internet of Blockchains approach. And I realize we're trying to get down to Web3 versus Web2 and Generation 1 and Generation 2. But that was a big piece there, is creating a federation where you don't have primacy in this ecosystem. So there's no core base layer chain like you have in Ethereum, where you have these different chains that are built off of it, and it's the core. You're still asking a lot from that centralized, or that central point, not centralized, but central point blockchain. Here you have a federation where you have IBC channels that open up, and you have a much more distributed workload.
I know. Go, Brendan.
Well, I was just going to say,
go, Brendan.
Today, the applications, we call them decentralized apps, or dApps, that are found all over the world, they're basically using Web 2.0 technologies. They're using technologies from the past, and they use these external systems. They have their own servers, and they use APIs to interrogate and interact with this decentralized blockchain. And it's worked as far as it has so far, but it's very limiting. And it's limiting because it's kind of like throwing out the playbook for what it means to be decentralized. And so Cody was talking about all of your intentionality, all the programming logic, all the applications ride on the blockchain, whatever blockchain you're operating from in this ecosystem. And that's a really, really big deal, because what it means is today, if you're running an application, you're dependent on third parties. You're dependent on them to run their servers correctly. You're dependent on them to solve lots of scaling issues and race conditions and lots of things that on the back end that Web 2.0 companies have. What we've built is fully decentralized, lives on chain, and it opens up a whole new set of possibilities, because all the applications bring their own execution environment. Whatever blockchain or blockchains that they're operating on, they operate on those natively.
Yeah, it's interesting, guys. I have this discussion all the time with folks, and we've developed apps in-house too. And a lot of them are exactly the way you're explaining them, like traditional Web 2 technologies, sending out, pinging the network, validating on one or two nodes or multiple decentralized nodes, and then it's sending that information back. What you're talking about is truly, and for you guys, it's an operating system, but really being able to build really streamlined applications truly on the block. And I think that's something that people don't really understand. Just like the idea of centralized blockchains versus decentralized, right? One or two nodes versus millions of nodes, right? There's a huge difference, and it's a discussion that we don't have to get too into it, but it's a discussion that I have quite a bit, and people just don't understand it, actually.
Yeah.
So in a sense, the future is blockchain agnostic. I was going to say the future is blockchain agnostic in a sense, right? Like you could theoretically be on Solana, Ethereum, Polkadot, you name it. You'll bounce around between blockchains, right?
That's right. Nobody cares what database you're running. When you open up your computer and you start using it, you don't know what version of software you're running. You don't know if you're using this database or that database, or even this operating system or that system. You just know that you can access the apps that you want. You can run the business that you want to run. You can conduct whatever types of activity that you want using that computer. And the technology disappears. And that's where blockchains are going. We're not going to be talking about L1s and L2s and this blockchain and that blockchain. That stuff disappears. The reason why we talk about it is because we have to. It's so hard, and everything's so particular about the exact technology stack that it's still, still a really complicated thing to use and interact, and you have to know those things.
Yeah, I think you hit it, Brendan. And it's like once the technology disappears, people really don't care what's behind the door,
Right.
behind the under the hood, I should say. And that's truly when you've done something special. When all the technology, all of this craziness that we're involved in right now, goes away. That to me is success for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The listener should be asking the question, well, okay, great, but why do I care? Why do I care about these blockchains? I've got everything that I need. And, Web3, powered by these public decentralized blockchains, they let us build the internet as we wish we would have built it way back when. It's building the future that we want, where privacy is first, control of our data is first, and other people don't control our destiny because they happen to be first with some software, or they get to extract extraordinary costs because they happen to have the first position in these two-sided platforms that exist in Web 2.0. So you have all these tech giants. In the future, all of the computation is private, and it opens up the possibility where everyone can just plug into whatever software capabilities they need, just like they would plug in their computer to an outlet in the wall, or they would flip on a switch on the wall. It's just a utility. Banking is reduced to a protocol. Banks are already getting rid of all the stores. The actual service keeps going down and down and down. It can be handled algorithmically. There are programs that can handle 85%, 90% of everything a retail bank does for customers. And that's the future.
Brendan, you hit on something earlier on. As we're talking about the technology disappearing, the one thing we don't want to disappear is the idea of why we're using these new technologies, Web3, blockchain, right? And that is, and that very sentiment scares the poop out of a lot of big companies, big tech companies, governments across the world. And it's the idea of absolute truth, right? Yeah. And validating two opposing entities.
People want freedom. People like freedom. That is a universal truth. People want freedom. You can look at any culture in the world. The more freedom they have, the happier the people are. And you've got these, like Brendan was saying. This is where I get in my soapbox here. But the fact that I don't have control over the sort feature in my Instagram is a freaking travesty. The fact that some in San Francisco decided that you're not going to get that feature because it doesn't benefit me. Yet I'm the user. You've got a billion users using these platforms, and we're being told what to do by these companies. And I think once we're able to take that platform out of their hands and say no, you don't. This isn't a singular person that gets to make a decision on how I operate. That's not tolerated in this area. So the idea is that if we can take the logic that Uber is doing, right? And Uber takes half when a driver, what you pay for an Uber trip, half of it goes to the guys in San Francisco. I don't understand why. To pay for the data analysts. I don't understand this, this fee structure. But what are you? Look at the logic being done in the Uber app. It's basically saying it's a little bit of trigonometry. you're close to this person. This person needs, wants to pick you up. This person needs to be picked up. You match them together. You charge a fee, and then everybody makes out well. Except that you've got this 50% burden you're having to carry from someone who's not producing any value. They got in early, like Brendan said. They locked into the platform, and now they control it, and they get to make all the rules. And what's the alternative? There's not one right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
You said this. I think we said this in our pre-interview. The last chapter of the sovereign individual is what blockchain is.
Exactly. Yes, I love that one, and it's a great book. And then the what's the other one? The network. The network state, yeah, that phenomenal. That if anyone, the network state is a book to read for sure.
Rich, when you first connected with Andromeda and these guys, how long did it take before you saw the significance of what's being developed here? Just curious.
Well, I mean, Cody and I met years ago. He introduced this idea of, and keep me honest here, bud. He was on stage explaining something about validating artwork, like priceless pieces of art. And I was like, whoa, and I had been in it for a while, but obviously not that level of understanding or obviously programming knowledge. But the way he explained it, I said, this is something very interesting. He couldn't mention the organization he was working with because of privacy issues and, of course, time to market. That blew me away. Other protocols and projects started to open the door, like Pandora's box. And once you jump the chasm, I think we all use that term, once your mind goes there, it's a floodgate. And it almost becomes overwhelming, right? But when talking to these guys, the whole team, understanding how it's just going to make life a lot easier to spin up these things. People just like, yes, you can spin up an NFT pretty darn easy with very limited technology know-how. But really to build an NFT or a smart contract that is truly rooted in utility and actually maybe has geofencing and AI baked into it. And how would I even approach that? I wouldn't even know, but I'm interested and I want to get involved. So to me, the idea of, and I hate the WordPress analogy because I think you're light years ahead of that whole thing. It's really understanding that truly these ADOs are drag and drop. You're plugging one node into another node. You're having one communicate to another, and then voila, at the end of the day, you've got this whole system. You put in some variables, you change up the financial allocations or whatever you're planning to do. To me, that was just a very big deal. And that was like day one getting involved with them.
And there's a lot of, so a lot of this is emergent, and a lot of these, like what we're seeing in computer science is we see a lot of technology that replicates organic systems. And so a lot of times, like drawing upon, other areas, like I said, computers in the 1960s, operating systems in the late 60s, also organic systems. Like you look at how cells communicate, how neural pathways work. If you understand how those systems work, you can sometimes make better decisions on how a system over here might function. You can, of course, when we talk about AI, we're not doing the neural nets on chain quite yet, but we're able to plug into those things using oracles and ways to kind of stitch those things together very lightly.
So the Cosmos ecosystem emerged as one of the founders, Ethan Buckman at Informal Systems. He from the very beginning was advocating modeling on organic design and using biology and the processes and the distribution and networks that we see there to actually create the Cosmos ecosystem. So it's inspired from the very beginning to be like that, more like that, less monolithic, less monopolistic.
So one thing here for me is just for our listeners, our viewers, you guys are marching towards, product release in the next couple of months, which is so exciting for people kind of chomping at the bit, and people who really just want to kind of get to know Andromeda a little bit better and perhaps enter your world and start playing with your tools. Walk us through a very simple experience. What is it? Because if I get asked this question, it's 1,000 times all the time. What the heck does a Web3 interface look like? What does a blockchain interface like Andromeda look like? Give us a little walkthrough.
Okay. So we've got a number of use cases. We've actually built some early solutions to demonstrate and prove to ourselves that we can have the capabilities that we want to have. There's a project called Minerva, and for them we created a crowdsourced sale, pre-sale of barrels of wine. There's a wine consortium that operates globally, and they want to pre-sell production of barrels of wine so that they can fund their working capital and access that source of capital. In doing so, we've created an app that operates the crowd sale. When the sale is completed, it takes the proceeds, it splits it three ways: one to the buyer, one to the user, one to an escrow account for insurance against future fulfillment. It creates an NFT collectible that actually represents the item, and all of this happens on a marketplace that's configurable and branded by whoever's using this app. And so this is the sort of app that we estimate would take about 6 months to build, and today it can be done in an hour or so. I mean, and in fact, if that's built, if you had the specs, we actually have the app, and right now you can copy it, paste it, own it, not borrow it, not rent it. You can own it and actually make it your software and configure it the way you want. Now, technically, what that looks like, if you're an engineer, if you're a builder, you're using a no-code builder, and you've got two different choices. You can use the no-code builder. You could use a command line interface. So the no-code builder is going to let you drag and drop these ADOs, these Andromeda digital objects. So, for example, we've got an ADO that's called crowd sale. You drop it in, and it's got a menu-driven configuration of how you want to operate your crowd sale. We've got a splitter contract. This is an ADO that is called the splitter, and you want to take proceeds from this other ADO when it completes the crowd sale, and you want to split that three ways. So you have you configure how many ways you want to split it, what currencies you want to split it in, and you actually send it out. You want to generate an NFT. So you have an NFT collectible, and you build that into this system of ADOs. You get the idea. Over time, you end up with this about 10 different ADOs that operate this highly capable app. Now, if you want to do something more, if you're not a product developer or a person that wants to use drag and drop capability, there is a command line interface, and you can use normal programming techniques and JSON, which is something that we use at the command line to actually put this together. And it's astounding how succinct and expressive that process is at the command line. So either way, but that's kind of what it looks like. So
awesome. And I would assume as you're building and learning, your libraries are growing, correct?
That is correct.
The whole architecture is each of these ADOs are freestanding, and we can actually add them to the system one by one as we develop more of the ADOs, or in the future we allow the public to come in and create ADOs, and that gets sort of added to the capabilities of the entire system. So if you think about like on a Unix platform, you can install different packages. Well, that's kind of what we're doing here. It's not kind of. It's exactly what we're doing here. We're allowing anybody out there to come in and start plugging holes, and necessity is the mother of innovation in a lot of ways, and we want to harness that. So basically, creating a platform for anybody to create solutions, create extra functionality. And there's a point where we hit that Pareto curve, and it's like, dude, this system does it all. Like it really does. Like minus the last little bits out there, but those get developed over time. And so we're going to get 99% functionality of what we want to get done with with around 80 to probably 100 ADOs, and we're at 30 right now. And we'll have to let the public come in and tell us what's next and contribute that way.
How hard is the ADO creation process for a developer? Because that's going to be pivotal.
You do need to know Rust, and Rust is not the easiest language to get into, depending on where you're coming from. If you're a Web 2.0 JavaScript developer standpoint, Rust is probably a little more difficult. If you went to school and have 4 years of computer science, no problem. You're well trained and ready to go. So the barrier to entry here isn't all that high. I mean, we've got multiple billions worth of people, multiple billions of people in the world now that can program in these languages. We just got to get it to the front door and give them a pathway to get the stuff launched and not have to have such a monolithic, long build system.
Yeah, so there are several ways that if you find that the library of ADOs that we have doesn't meet all of your needs, there are several different ways for you to get the ADO that you need. One is you can build it your own. We've got a full set of documentation. It's all up to date. You can go out there and look at how we do it, submit it, it gets processed in, it gets audited, and it goes into the library, or you could just use it yourself. The second way is you have incentives for developers or bounties, and you actually hire people to go do that. And then third, we have another model where, and we're currently studying this, where we use basically incentivized development, where developers get an economic interest in the ADO that is missing and that they need to build, and that needs to be built. And so they, or the team that helps them build the ADO, gets compensated as the ADO gets used. And of course, in our world, in the open source world, this doesn't mean you're extracting economic rents from people, forever. It means it's on a bonding curve, and it goes down to some maintenance rate after giving you a really good return.
Yeah, Brandon, we could talk for hours, and I actually want to do another segment. Matt and I would love to do just a whole segment on workforce and how you manage teams or not manage teams. And the whole idea of exactly, right? so the whole idea of gamifying it and verification, and
that's right.
it's a beautiful thing, and to actually see and witness.
Well, it changes the whole dynamic of work in a sense, right? Everything can be quantified. It's not this, did you clock in from 9 to 5? It's like, it's done, or isn't it? And we can prove it and look at it. Right.
Yeah, the open source movement started in the late 80s and really flourished in the 90s once we have internet connectivity and we were able to start connecting things. There's a huge piece that Brendan and I go back on, and it's like, what would those the founders, the people who started those movements, what would they have done if they had the ability to enforce economic incentives? They didn't have that. It was all shareware, remember, or donateware,
I haven't heard that term in so long, shareware.
I know.
Right. Well, yeah, but now we put it on a platform. We say ads. I mean, it's just we just push things around. It's really perverted. But what would a Eric S. Raymond have done if they had the tools to enforce economic incentives in their systems? Dude, I have no idea. But how much further would we be along if we could have done that? Instead of asking, people like myself to spend, I go to work all day, come home, and I get to be creative, I get to do innovation, and then at the end of the night, I have to can you throw me $50 for that? I really appreciate it. I need to pay my rent. I really like to do this full time, but instead I have to go work for SAP building solutions for General Motors. Like, it's not really what I want to do, and there's no innovation there. But it's that crunch back and forth.
Yeah, and for developers picking projects they're interested in, both from a programming challenge standpoint, but from a belief standpoint. Like, I don't believe in what you're doing, so I'm not going to work with you. I'm going to support this protocol and that protocol. I'm going to submit. I'm going to be validated. I'm going to be rewarded. It's a very interesting system. And again,
it goes against all the MBA teachings out there of how you derive value. You extract value, instead of like letting someone if you go to a painter and you say, hey, I want a painting that looks exactly like this. Here's an image. I want you to paint that exactly. They go, all right, I'll paint that for you, I guess. If you go to a painter and you say, hey, something that reminds me of the spring, can you do something? The guy goes, oh, of course, I would love to do that. And they put they put full creative expression into that thing. You get a much better product.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you enforce too much control over things, and you put people in a box, like you're saying, Cody, you're only going to get what you kind of inquired about. You're not going to get the creative juice. You're not going to me, that's not a model for innovation. But if you propose a problem and you ask for a solution in a very certain way, now you're going to get minds open, and you're going to get some dynamic results.
It's an emergent phenomenon in humans.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting because I truly believe there is something bigger, like sociologically, that's happening, in the Web3 space. We don't know what it is. You guys are kind of experiencing it quite a bit and helping to forge the way from a historical and future standpoint. It's just something bigger we can't put our finger on, but it's very exciting for sure.
Well, it's kind of a convergence of all areas of life. It's because our lives have moved digital. So when we have digital ownership, we have more ownership of our actual lives at this point. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question on ADOs, Andromeda Digital Objects. So when these are being developed, on one hand, you have problems being solved, but is there a curation process? How do we determine that something that someone else developed, not that you developed, is actually legitimate, that it works, that it functions? What's that process involved?
So that's where the DAO comes into play, and that might be a better discussion for a more complex set of discussions. But essentially, this system is permissionless, but it's also gate kept by the community to make sure that the actual code that my mom might use isn't harmful. We can't expect my mom to be able to go in and read Rust code and make sure that it's actually not going to. It says that it sent the money to so and so, but really it just sent it to the guy who put the bug in there, or the hack. So there is a set of permissions. Now it's not opinionated. So if somebody wants to create a digital object that no one's going to use and wants to submit it, as long as it doesn't break anything, that's fine. But we're not going to limit creativity or expression on that side. So it's permissionless in that sense. It's gate kept and permissioned from a security and creating a high standard. You need to have documentation. It needs to be audited. It needs to be vetted by your peers to make sure that it's interoperable with the other places, and maybe get some feedback on design choices. Hey, did you know that you might want to use that solution with this other one being created? Oh, I didn't think about that. That's the kind of stuff we're going to be asking for, but it's not heavy-handed, and it's not centralized power. That's the most important piece. It's the Andromeda community and ecosystem that sort of enforces that.
But the community will catch anything that would be insidious or malfunctioning effectively.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the token holders are the ones that.
Yeah. Well, you've got a third-party auditing process that all the ADOs go through. So these ADOs, they're modular, they're composable, they sit in this Andromeda logic library, and before they go there, they're going to be audited. Okay, every piece of code is audited by a third party. The community will look at them and audit them as well. There will be incentivization, we call them bug bounties, to actually audit them. So all of these things are in place to preserve the integrity of the contracts and these ADOs. However, when you start building really complex systems of ADOs, you're composing lots of ADOs into some type of system that is sold or presented to the market as an app. That has to be audited as well, because just because you have lots of audited contracts doesn't mean that whoever built the app didn't put a malicious logic in there, or didn't configure in a way that is not useful or harmful to either the user or or even the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique transition, and it seems like, just curious, because there's so many layers to get to that level of sophistication. Just from your team, where, and I think this probably includes Rich, us as at ARC as well, but where are the biggest challenges in terms of development? What have been the biggest hurdles? We talked earlier about, you get 90% of the way there, and then there's that last 10% where it's just the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's really around the technology stacks that we're using they're still in their infancy stage. I think they're at the earliest stage that what we're doing can be done. But for instance, documentation on a lot of projects is lacking. So learning how to build on these things, you've got a lot of instability in a lot of areas. None of the chains are configured the exact same way. So we haven't quite standardized everything, but I think that's going to that's coming. It's part of the process, and I think we're at the earliest point where you could stand up something like we're doing in an ecosystem. So the difficult part is just this being a really, really early part in the early days of building in this ecosystem.
Yeah, the other thing that happens, we're talking about the last 10%. We've achieved all the major breakthroughs that we need. Okay, so the architecture, all the creative power of our engineering team operating in this really loose fashion like a basketball team, and really pushing hard for the last 14, 15 months to create a breakthrough technology. All of those technological leaps in architecture and design have been made, and we've proven them. We've already proved the capability. So at this point, that last 10% is really, I guess American football, we call it blocking and tackling, but it's the basics. Okay, so we talked about, we start introducing more cathedral-like processes. We get more methodical with our project management. We're already seeing that. Our development and release cadence is getting very disciplined. The team's really embraced it, and you can see it coming together really fast now in that last 10%.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've sat next to these guys for quite some time, witnessing the whole kind of experience, obviously not at a granular code level, but really interacting with them and understanding what's been going on. So you have to understand for our viewers that they're creating a suite of tools on the world's computer, if you will. And we've talked about this, Matt, before, where you're failing in public a lot of times, right? Almost. I mean, you guys really haven't, but you guys have had planet-sized boulders thrown at your heads, like almost on a daily basis. Protocols imploding, which totally spun everyone out of control, including you guys. Not out of control. You guys kind of shucked and jived perfectly and managed yourselves, but these are regulations and protocols going down, and coins that are not working, algorithmic coins that are just not supporting the system properly. You guys have seen it all, and really, I mean, I have to give it to you. That's impressive to dodge regulations and things that are happening in the media, that everyone's hearing about. You guys have been dealing with it.
I see it completely different. To me, it's really impressive that somebody can go and sit in a chair for 9 hours and do accounting. That's what's
right.
Like, how could you do that? For me, being in this lively environment where things are shifting on a constant basis, and you never know what's going to happen tomorrow and who's going to get hacked and what's going to. This is exciting, man. This is the only place to be for me. I thrive in unstable environments. I love this stuff. I wouldn't have it any other way.
It's the warfare of coding.
And we share. Yeah, we share your sentiment, Cody, for sure. And that's one of the things, it's interesting, even for a company like ours who are helping with communications and branding and some development work, it's all a very waterfall kind of, hybrid, agile environment and whatnot. But this is truly the Wild West, in a lot of ways. There are no playbooks, and you guys are cutting your teeth. You're falling down, but you're getting back up quicker, right? And the idea, just like your communities that you're cultivating, you're learning and you're building, and it's all blocks that are just tearing up to something really special. So, we share your excitement, Cody, for sure.
It does always seem like, 2 points. The elegance of simplicity always requires so much complexity to get there. People don't always appreciate the incredible work that goes into getting something. When it finally works, when you have an ADO and you just put it in there and it's just seamless to the user, they don't understand the immensity that it took to get there. And then when one little thing goes wrong, they complain. But
exactly.
But then I have a second question or a thought, I guess, which is anyone else out there doing anything like this? This seems like unique in a very profound way. Not that you want to advertise anyone else, but well, actually,
we're tracking about 72 different companies across all the ecosystems: Ethereum, Polkadot, Cosmos. There are lots of applications, dApps that are in projects that are using the type of language that we use: composable, modular, and creating apps, no-code builders, these sorts of things, marketplaces. What we don't see is, of everyone in the world, we don't see anyone that has created a fully decentralized system. And it's a technical distinction, but it makes all the difference. It means that the scalability, the ease of implementation, the speed at which you can build can't be matched. When we look at the level of innovation, when you take these Web 2.0 technologies and you're using APIs to interact with the blockchain, you run into lots of scale issues, and you also run into a lot of, it's really hard to extend functionality and to innovate in those environments. What we've created is made for that. It was born for that. It was born for people to build really, really fast and really capable systems. And again, the difference is the architecture. An architecture that an end user ultimately doesn't care about unless it's really better. And that's what we have to prove. And we think, at least initially, we're going to be able to, or we're inviting developers in to use the tools. And when they can do something in 30 minutes that used to take 6 months, I think we'll have made our point.
Yeah, that is quite a difference. I love that. I love those numbers for sure. And those will be promoted heavily for sure.
Yeah.
Now, as we're kind of, nearing the end here, perhaps, when are you planning on launching the application?
Yeah, so
$1 million question.
We've got a proof of capability that we've rolled out. It looks like a really early beta, probably more like an alpha. We're expecting that in the next 6 weeks, we can have a public beta where we introduce the public. We're already introducing privately people into the software to use it and build solutions. When we talk about being ready for public release, it doesn't mean that it is completely usable for a normal person walking off the street. It's not Shopify. It's not an operating system as easy to use as the one on your mobile phone. That is the direction, and technically there's no reason why we can't build those experiences. Initially, the tools are going to Web3 and Web2 developers who want to go much, much faster, build more capable solutions, and connect their projects to other projects throughout the Cosmos ecosystem.
Mm. And, Brendan, this team and the ARC team have talked a lot about who you guys are targeting, right? I know who they are, but who are you targeting? Who are you guys targeting at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question because we have a lot of people ask us, well, what's your use case? What industry are you going after? It's like, well, what industry does an operating system go after? You make all the industries better. You make them all more capable. We see the earliest target market being Web3 developers. They understand what they want to do. They have a clear vision of what they have to do to build or at least the functionality that they want to create and deploy as a decentralized app. And it's really maddening. It's a frustrating process for everyone. We can make things really easier, better, and faster for them soon. We are already demonstrating projects that will stand up really, really quickly. So we'll have great use cases, great reference accounts, scaled reference accounts very soon in the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, I can see product innovators getting involved. Obviously the development community is kind of the tip of the spear with protocols like your, and OSs like yours. And business folks. I mean, really, when you start to understand, product life cycles, and you can create, real business solutions rooted in utility. Real. That's right. And it's not, once you start to go into that from a business mind, it really starts to get exciting too.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say, what are the missed business opportunities for people not embracing Web3 right now, in your views?
Andromeda's tools are really going to unleash the creative powers of all of the creators. You already see it in the NFT phenomena, both in music and NFT and other digital collectibles. What we can do is give them the power to create and innovate new business models and support new functionality and extend the functionality. Today, the functionality is really pretty thin. You buy something at a marketplace, you can look at it. There's scarcity attached to it, which is wonderful. That's an early use case. Tokenizing as Cody says, the $500 trillion in the world today of real world assets that aren't liquid, that could be. And they're not liquid because they don't fit in the categories that the largest institutions currently securitize. And that's a great business for them. They've got all they can handle. Small banks can't handle low liquidity, real world assets, too much risk. And so it's a completely neglected market, and connecting real world assets to decentralized finance and the very best of those products is a huge opportunity, both for creating liquidity with those assets, but also introducing whole new business models and economics around those. Finally, there is another model, and that is, and that's uniquely powered by these decentralized systems, and that's coordination games. Today, there are consortium and there are industries that are really being held hostage by distributors, wholesalers, intermediaries, people that are in the middle. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them is because those intermediaries show up with capital, okay, so they can buy product and other things that need to be distributed. So blockchains will connect consortium industries to decentralized finance and create marketplaces where the entire industry can actually participate in the value creation of the network that disintermediates all the intermediaries today.
So it effectively unlocks entire markets that didn't exist prior. I think this is something you and I talk about a lot, Rich, right?
Correct.
Oh, absolutely. That's the exciting, truly exciting part, is when you slice out the middleman and you bring two like-minded parties together and doing business. It's magic. Magic. Right. That's all you can, that's the only way I can say it. and much needed.
Yeah.
So I think on that note, as we wrap it up, for people wanting to learn about Andromeda, tell us, guys, where can they go? Where do they start?
Well, I think you would go to www.andromedaprotocol.io, and there you'll find a couple different paths. Okay, you can find a high-level explanation of what we're about. If you're an executive or a product developer, if you're a developer or you want to get your hands on the technology, we've got a path for developers to get to our documentation. Very soon we'll have a public link for people to actually use the technology and actually build with it in a test environment. And those tools and the documentation are fairly comprehensive, and we've spent a lot of time making sure that when users and developers onboard, they want to create, that they've got the information that they need so that they can learn how to do it.
And I think when we usually wrap these podcasts up, and I think this is a great way to end, if you were to say there's 1 to 2 major takeaways, if someone listening to this, if you would hope that they remember 1 to 2 things, what would that be? And maybe all of us can go around the table, maybe starting with Brendan.
If you want to build really fast, or if you want to build something really new and you have an idea about what you could do in Web3, Andromeda would be a great place to start.
If you're a programmer and you're interested in seeing, really pushing the limits and seeing probably one of the most ambitious projects out there in this space, I would definitely come take a look at what we're doing.
Yeah. And I'll just wrap up here, guys. We've been working with the Andromeda team for quite some time. Personally, I would say go hit up their Twitter, their Discord channels, start interacting with them, because it really is a vibrant community. There's a lot of smart people out there thinking differently, truly thinking differently, and doing exciting things. And when I first saw this, it got me very excited, because it brings in a whole new, welcomes in a whole new world of creatives and developers and content people. So with that said, guys, thank you so much. This has been, as usual, an amazing dialogue that probably can go on for days on end. We know that. We really appreciate your time, and I think our community is really going to appreciate the products you're putting out and how you're going to support Web3 and the blockchain in general, and get people off and running and building business applications. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.